way you described that. But earlier too, I mean, about the voice and for others to learn that. Earlier in your description, you went right to it and dealt with their defense of externalizing and blaming. And you basically said, you're the one who was responsible for that because you trained them that way. That's what stopped them in their tracks because they're sitting there complaining
Yeah.
as a defense. They're
Yeah.
doing it all wrong. And instead of just saying, I'm curious, how did you teach? You went right to it, which is great.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think too, comedy feeds into that, right? Because
well,
I was a
you
stand-up
lighten the
comedian.
moment. You see, you've been able to integrate that. That's amazing. It's like a great drink, like a great mixed drink. You know when you've had a Long Island iced tea, and it's because a Long Island iced tea will make you go, whoa. If you never had
It
one,
doesn't
okay,
taste like
right? Because it has all the dark
Arnold
and all the
Palmer,
light.
really.
Yes,
Long
okay.
Island.
It doesn't
Yeah.
taste. It doesn't taste good to be. It's not supposed to.
Right.
But you can take something like that and mix it up, and then and blend it, and that's the gift that you've been able to harness and put together. Now, I want to ask you. You've said that success for you shifted from external validation to how you operate under pressure. How do you define that for yourself now?
It comes back to embodiment. It comes back to what if it's I had a coach a long time ago who said if it's light, it's right. If it's heavy, it's wrong. And so this is what led me to develop the current program that I lead, the leadership development pipeline that I do with my private clients and go into organizations and up level their high performers. Because in 2024, so going back to imposter syndrome.
Have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? A loss, a new path, or an awakening that forced you to rewrite your life? Pivot Point is a podcast that explores those stories. I'm Nik Michael. We'll dive into how pain can spark growth and how crisis leads to clarity. Subscribe to Pivot Point today. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nik Michael. I want to start today with a question that I think most high-performing people never actually stop to ask themselves. Not because it's hard, but because everything around them keeps confirming that they don't need to. The results are there, the track record is solid, the external markers of success are lined up in exactly the right order, and yet there's something that shows up at the threshold of the next level. A hesitation that doesn't quite make sense given the evidence. A voice that arrives precisely when the stakes get higher and the visibility increases. And it doesn't say anything particularly rational. It just creates enough friction to make you pause, to second guess, to pull back just slightly from the edge of something that actually matters. We've come to call that imposter syndrome. And I think that label, as familiar as it's become, it frames the evidence as a flaw, a deficit, something to overcome before you're allowed to move forward. My guest today offers a very different interpretation, and it's one that I find not just more accurate, but more useful. Jen Coken is an executive leadership coach, speaker, and what she calls a velvet sledgehammer. She works with high-performing leaders, particularly women in STEM, who are already succeeding by every measurable standard, but who now know there is a level of leadership, visibility, and impact they haven't fully stepped into yet. When discovered, first in her own story, then in the work she does with her clients, is that the pattern showing up at that threshold isn't a malfunction, it's a protection strategy. Built intelligently, built for very good reasons. And the pivot point isn't about dismantling it, it's about learning to lead while it's present. That's where today's conversation lives. And I think it's going to land somewhere specific for a lot of people listening. Jen, welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm really glad you're here. What I thought was we would start with one of the pivot points that you mentioned that occurred several years ago.
Yeah, Nik, thank you so much for having me. And the work I do with imposter syndrome, as always, the work I'm always doing comes from my as-lived experience. And so back in 2019, I had a big contract with a big tech firm. My job was to help train a cadre, a cohort of emerging high performers into emerging leaders. Some of them were managing, some of them were going into management. And when I was on the road and I was in front of them training, or when I was doing my one-on-one coaching calls with them, I was fine. Felt grounded. I felt solid. I knew my stuff. But there were moments when I was not on the road, when I was at home reflecting on what happened while I was at those training sites. There was about 5 in total over the course of a year, that I was reduced to a puddle of tears. I used to joke and say I would hide under the covers until it was time to come out and take the next trip. And that became a huge pivot point for me, and a place where I began my own research and interest into what is this thing we call imposter syndrome.
So most people in that situation would chalk it up to nerves or stress and just keep moving. What made you recognize that something more of a pattern was happening or going on?
Yeah, it was such a good question, because I think most human beings, except if they're, I don't know, you're the person with the letters after his name, but it could be like narcissists or people like that. I think most people think it's their fault. In fact, I did a poll on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago asking women, what do you think's in between you and your next promotion? Why haven't you gotten promoted? Is it you? Is it them? Is it something else? And 90% of the women said it was them. I thought it was my fault. And I kept running and rerunning the scenarios and the training and what I was told. And I've kept rerunning that loop in my head, trying to figure out what I could adjust to get back to that center of gravity for myself. And I think it was the 4th or 5th week-long class that we were teaching, I was designing a module on the 5 dysfunctions of a team, Patrick Lencioni's work. And as I was designing it, it was this aha light bulb moment. Oh my God, this team is dysfunctional. The team, not the people we were training, but there was something off in the group that I was working with. It was like we were all jockeying for position and trying to get the limelight, even though none of us, if you met us or knew us very well, we're the kind of people that would have thought of ourselves, or others would have thought of us as people who wanted the limelight. But somehow we were all disjointed and all trying to find the limelight. And in that moment, I began to have conversations with the other team members, and as a team began to dismantle what was happening. But more than that, I began to recognize this was a team of my peers. And I began to reflect and think about other times when I had had similar feelings of feeling out of it, not welcomed, not myself. And it was all around this experience of belonging. And then I got really interested in, well, where'd that brain pattern come from? This desire to belong. I mean, everybody has a desire to belong. It's in the human condition. We're not meant to be solo people. We're meant to live in community and in harmony. So I began to unpack that with my coach. And what I discovered is what I now call a defining moment. And then, I'll talk about that story in a minute if you want me to, but
Of course.
that defining moment, I thought, okay, is it just me? Or is this something that others are experiencing too? And the more I began interacting with my clients one-on-one, the more I began doing keynotes and workshops, every single person, male, female, etc. First of all, I figured out it was what is known today as imposter syndrome. I felt like a fraud, right? But that moment, that pivot point, that point where I was like, holy, huge light bulb moment, is I realized that it came from a moment when I was 6 years old. Because what I began to ask myself, and this is what anybody can ask themselves, when you feel uncomfortable, when you feel like a fraud, when you're questioning and doubting yourself, I began to think about, and I invite other people too, to check in with your body. Where are you feeling that tension in your body? Is it in your shoulders, your gut? What's your mood? What are the thoughts you're having? What's your emotional state? And then I kept asking myself, is there an earlier similar moment? Is there an earlier similar moment? Until I got back to this moment when I was 6, when I was madly in love with this boy, Keith, in my 2nd grade class. Maybe I was 7. I don't remember. However old you are in 2nd grade. And I really, really liked him because he had big black glasses and I had glasses. And we're like the only kids in our class that had glasses. And I thought, for sure, he has to like me back because we have glasses and we're meant to be together. And I went to kiss him on the playground and he went, ew, like kissed him on the cheek. And we went, ew. And in that moment, my little brain, all I remember is all the kids laughing at me. And I just wanted to disappear into the ground. And my little mind said, well, don't put yourself out there. Don't go for what you want. And as an adult, what that looked like was I'm going to be a great number two. I will push others to the front. I will get other people elected to office. I will promote other people's agendas. I will start nonprofits. I will end hunger. I will end homelessness. I will protect the environment. You fill in the gaps. I spent the majority of my career before I became a full-time coach 11 years ago, majority of my career as a social justice organizer, grassroots organizer, and part-time comedian, because the other thing I began to do was make people laugh. When I got in touch with that moment, it was like, when the Wizard of Oz, when it goes from black and white to color,
Oh, yes. Yes.
it was one of those moments, Nick, where I went, holy
I love
boop.
the movie. Yes.
Yeah. And it's not, once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Of course.
And as I began studying the neuroscience behind it, what I realized is that was an amygdala hijack. And in that moment, the brain had an unwanted experience, which caused the body to have an unwanted experience, unwanted emotions. So the brain's job is to keep you alive. So in that moment, the brain went
And protect you.
and protect me. Right. It used to be physical threat. Now it's psychological threat. Oops. Don't do that again. Don't put yourself out there like that again. You'll get embarrassed, because I just wanted to sink. I just want to disappear.
Yeah, and
On the
embarrassment and
playground.
shame is something that sparks so many. But take me back to that early moment, the one when you were 6 again. How does something formed so early in life become a strategy that follows someone into what you're in, which is the highest level of professional life? How did that transform to you?
Well,
How did you take that?
I connected the dots, because when you read stuff about imposter syndrome, and first of all, it's not a syndrome.
Right.
It's not a medical diagnosis. It's a phenomenon. When the two women who coined the phrase back in the 70s named it, it was imposter phenomenon, meaning it's a phenomenological, it's an as lived experience. So you feel the heart palpitations, you feel the sweaty palms, you feel the tenseness, and it's almost like you're back to that moment again. So I began to test the hypothesis that, wait a minute, this might have happened to me, but I actually turned it into a strength, because if I look at my career, I spent my career promoting other people. And when I hung out my own shingle 11 years ago, that was 2016. And then I began digging deeper and really putting myself out there. It was really scary. And so it kind of came to a head when now I'm like in an international team, traveling around the world with one of the Fortune 50 companies, doing this training. Like, how much of a bigger stage would you have? What I realized is that was a growth moment for me back then. But back then, what happens is the brain takes a decision to protect you. And that decision was, don't put yourself out there. So then it has to come up with a strategy to, oh, don't put yourself out there. So I became like the best number two that I can be. I'll push other people forward. And then when I do a meditation with my clients. I do a meditation in the keynotes and the workshops I lead. It's 5 minutes, Nick. But a lot of people don't have details about their childhood. I'm one of those lucky people. I have a very vivid imagination, a very vivid memory. Like, I remember smells and things to the tiniest detail. This is one of the reasons why I have people get in touch with the body sensations and the mood, and if they smell anything and the time of day, because they might not get back to the details, but they'll remember how it felt. And I say to them, so what was the unwanted experience? I was embarrassed, shame, like you mentioned. All right. What did you decide? This is not traumatic or dramatic, but your little 6-year-old brain, your 9-year-old brain took some decision that now, if you look at it, has helped propel you into success. So I began to test this with my clients, and to a T, every one of them, every person, even. And then I wondered, okay, this works one-on-one. How do I give a keynote? How do I do this in front of 1,000 people? And I tested it in 2022. And sure enough, I had a line of people come up to me, men, women, older, younger, didn't matter the age, going, I don't know how you do that, but I got back to this memory, and I can see, because the logic becomes inescapable. I can
Absolutely.
now see. And what I tell people is, you are like an upset 7-year-old driving your adult life. And unfortunately, before today, when you identified that brain pattern, it was like you had this car that could go in drive or reverse. So I could either be push somebody else forward or shrink. In my mind, those are my two options. Except if I went left, there was the ocean. And if I went right, there was the mountains. There was
Mm.
whole other worlds of possibilities that weren't obvious to me. So there you go. And then the more I tested it, the more it became real. And that's when I came out with my book a couple of years ago to let people know this there's not a way to manage your mind. People that tell you all the tips, tools, and tricks on the internet for imposter syndrome are a load of horse hockey
Yes.
because they don't really work. They work for a minute. But when someone tells me, if I'm in a bad mood and someone tells me to think positively, I just want to stick my nose up and go, I don't want to think positively right now. It's the same thing. If you're experiencing imposter phenomenon, attempting to trick it out of you is just going to make that brain pattern stuck. What works is identifying and disrupting that core pattern. So then you have a chance of showing up distinctly in those same moments of stress because it always happens under a moment of stress.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page where I share in-depth articles and reflections. I am just so impressed with what you're saying because what you're doing is actually a therapeutic method and approach, and that you not just because
Really?
you've stumbled onto it instinctively. And what's fascinating is you made a distinction that I think is really important. You don't call it imposter syndrome. You call it, I know you call it a protection pattern, or, so you've learned from an experience and then you've taken it and you reframed it. And you've understood that there are emotions that are stuck in the body that bring us back and almost make us feel stuck. And then we reprocess that to be able to satisfy and get out, have like an off ramp for that feeling of embarrassment or shame. And so now I can be there for other people. And then you're making that sacrifice that many of us do when we care for others more significantly than we do for ourselves. But you've taken that and you've turned it now into a strength to help others understand that it's not about just reframing or changing your perception. It's now taking it to the next level, embracing it, understanding it, finding almost its core origin. And what you're doing is early kind of childhood kind of work where you're going back to that emotion, which many probably don't want to remember because they've pushed that out of their mind. And it's because probably your excellent memory about having an attachment to not forgetting those core moments in your life that had a significant impact, both emotionally,
Yeah.
cognitively too. So
What
that's impressive.
What's interesting about that is twofold. One is when I have a vivid memory of something, this is what I've learned because, I've been doing personal growth and development. I'm 61 since I was 15 years old. So I had a long history of looking at things and going, just examining them, not finding fault, which I think a lot of people do. I shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't do this. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like that. And my response is always, well, who are you? Because if you're spending your whole life being not that, not that, not that, you've never taken the time to reveal what's underneath. So all those memories that used to stick with me were like vivid color. And when I discern the brain pattern that got me wrapped around the axle that has kept, because, when I used to think about that moment, I would get tense and nervous and pressure in my throat and
And
things like
freeze up,
that.
probably, and numb.
What's that?
Freeze up or become numb.
Well, yeah, freeze
Yeah.
up, exactly. But it goes from like technicolor to just fading into the background, almost like a tapestry. It was incredible to me. That's how I always equated, in those moments. And there was a second point I was going to make, but I don't remember what it was. I'm
Oh, it'll
sure
come
it
back to you.
will.
Sorry if I interrupted you. I was
No, no,
going to
no.
ask you.
You're totally fine. I have a tendency to talk a little
No,
bit
I
too
I
long
and I
at
want to
times.
listen, and I love when you speak. I've seen the
Oh,
work that
I
you
know
do.
what it
Go
was.
ahead.
The other
Yeah.
thing I always say when I do these meditations, I let people know I'm not a therapist. I'm
Mhm.
not a social worker. I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a trauma-informed person. So I always tell people, telescope out 50 to the 50,000 foot view. If at any time you find yourself activated Open your eyes, step out of the memory. Don't take it any further. I cannot be accountable if you get triggered because I don't have the tools to help you.
Well said,
If
though.
you, what's that?
Well said. Very well said. Yeah.
Yeah, because what I don't want to have is, and I remember one woman coming up to me after my moment in 2024 where I froze on stage. And she said to me, she goes, I'm very particular about people and actually listening to them. And she said, and I have trauma in my life. And the fact that you had me keep leveling out to the 50,000-foot view and witness it really worked for me. And I just want to thank you for that. And I was like, okay. I came to learn that after a while, trial and error. I screwed up at times when I was leading workshops with people. Thankfully, some of them were with close friends or organizations that would give me the feedback and I would adjust.
So I want to take it then to the work you're doing. How do you help someone see their own pattern as a strategy rather than a character flaw, especially when they've spent years treating it as the latter?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, always have said, people say you are what you eat.
Mm.
And today I'd be a bagel, by the way, if
Oh,
I
nice.
am what I eat. I had a bagel yesterday. I've been craving bagels. Maybe it's because Passover's done or something. I don't know, but not like kept kosher during Passover. But anyway, people say you are what you eat. I say you are what you speak. And I listen carefully when my clients are speaking to me or I'm speaking to anybody. I'm like, huh, did you notice you said this? Did you notice you said that?
Again, you're being therapeutic again.
That's so funny.
I mean,
Huh.
you are. I mean, you're an excellent listener. Are you a musician?
I'm a musician, I'm a singer, but I led courses for a worldwide personal growth and development company for 15 years in the ontology, the design of human being. And we spent a lot of time being trained in neuroscience and some neuro-linguistic programming. So from that perspective, that's where that all comes from. But I don't do what you do, and I started out as a psychology major and then went into politics, which was probably apropos.
Well, you have a firm grip and probably an innate quality to connect with, understanding human behavior, the psychology of being and doing and living and thinking and feeling. And again, I think to compliment the work that you're doing, you've transferred that instinctively into
Yeah.
the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And people pick up on that, but you're authentic and you're very forthcoming and you tell it like it is. And I think your ear for music, whether or not you played an instrument or not, is irrelevant, but you have a connection there and you have a great ear to pick up on things and see them. So this is where I think your clients are very fortunate to have you in their corner working with you,
Thank you.
because clearly, I mean, this is what I'm always struck by when someone can bring a natural, innate kind of talent, the connection that they made, and then take it to the next level to inspire and help others and improve the quality of their lives. And although you're doing it within a business framework, right, and as a coaching framework, that's still having a major impact on an organization, the people that work with them. You can probably dissect your in essence, your diagnostic skills are right there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate those kind
Yeah.
of words. I
Yeah.
accept them.
Well, you see, that's the nice part about it too. You see, you've reached a point where you can. It's some people when they receive a compliment, they're quick to brush it off or dismiss it. And I'm sure you work with high-powered people that do that because they don't want to feel like they're in a dependent role right now. Like when you compliment your boss is going to say, "Thank you very much. You're a junior worker." And so when you could demonstrate to them, just take the compliment and accept it and say thank you, but that's a level of progression that goes on with experience and to get to that point of maturity to be able to do that. I find that younger people may not be they might get more defensive. They might think what is he feeding me a line for? What's he going to get out of this? But when you
Well,
see
what
something authentic, and that's what you are.
well, thank you. What I find with the women I work with is they usually deflect. It
Yes,
was my team. It
yes.
doesn't mean it was my team, right? And because they don't want to sound arrogant. And I say to them, look, here's the thing I want you to consider. And I try to model what I do. I'm not always great. And I also, I was a horrible boss a long time ago. And so from that, I have learned not to be a horrible boss and what really works to be a great manager, to empower people, to inspire people, to breathe life into your team. But I say to them, look, if I came to your house if you invited me over for dinner, first of all, I'm not going to show up empty handed. I don't even care if you told me don't bring anything. I'm going to have flowers, bottle of wine, something, even if you're having it's a something where people are just popping in. I'm bringing a bottle of wine for you and your partner to drink later or whatever you to enjoy. I'm going to bring something. It would be as if me showing up with gifts in hand and you open the door, you go, "Hey, Jen, great to have you. Could you leave that crap outside the door?" I tell people, it's like you are saying no to a gift someone's offering you. And the thing to consider is that when people acknowledge you or give you a compliment about something, it's because they're seeing themselves in you, or they see some aspect of themselves in what you are embodying, because we can't see in others what we don't ourselves possess.
Again, embrace it, accept it, acknowledge it,
Yep.
appreciate it,
Yep.
and there's no hidden, that was great what you just said, or whatever compliment you're receiving or giving, you're teaching them firsthand. And again, I like how you said you've improved over the years in how to be a better manager or a boss. And that takes a growth mindset if you're familiar with that approach. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah,
But I tell you and all your listeners, my favorite phrase when I was a manager: if you can't hack it, get your jacket. I'll find someone who can.
I've heard that. You said it. I like that.
Oh yeah, that was me to a T. I'm like, you know what? Because in politics, it was like, man up. Even if you're a woman, man up, do the thing. Too bad. Election day is 88 days away. We're all don't have any sleep. We all don't feel good. We all, whew, yeah, not a cultural friendly to not having people burn out. To having people be healthy and well. Not a very good culture for that.
Well, so let me bring it back then. I appreciate that. That's well said. If someone is waiting to feel ready before stepping into the next level of leadership or visibility, what's the most honest thing you can say to them?
Well, I would say two things. One is you're never going to be ready. You're never going to feel ready. I don't know. I've never felt ready for anything I've stepped into. If I waited, I'd still be waiting.
Well
I
said.
feel like,
I like that.
so you're never going to feel ready because the brain's trying to protect you. Look, the brain on average has something like 50, 60,000 thoughts a day, depending on who you talk to, as many as 120,000. 80 to 85% are negative, 90 to 95% are repetitive. So the brain's never dealing with reality either. So it's consistently scanning the horizon for threat. And it's comparing it to all the times that the human that it's a brain of felt threatened in the past. So you are never going to feel ready. The question is, do you have the community around you to support you at that next level? If you don't have that in place, if you don't have a circle of friends or mentors or powerful partnerships with other people who you can go to lift you up, to give you honest feedback, the velvet sledgehammer approach, which is direct but kind. The kinds of things I've said to people, like I was working with a client for 2 years and she had inherited somebody who should have been let go, the previous two bosses, and she was kind of stuck holding the mess. And I finally said to her and said, when are you going to, in a sense, man up? I was much more direct than that. I said, because we can keep talking about it, but nothing is going to change. And then from there, she just stopped. What I said stopped her in her tracks and she went, you know, you're right. Okay. What should I do next? I'm like, you should talk to HR. What is the process? Figure out the legal process. So if you're waiting to feel ready, you will never feel ready.
Your direct approach really serves well because you're coming from a caring place and you must have developed a level of rapport that is just the trust level. It's just so great. So, I mean, how do you distinguish in real time between a protection pattern that's been activated and a signal that something is genuinely misaligned or not right?
Such a good question. I think if I came across that, and I'm sure I have, but in this
Like
moment,
anyone that you're working with or whenever yeah.
well, what I always say to people is, because people will come onto a call complaining about someone or something. Like I had a client who was like, people are asking me so many questions. They're always asking me questions. And I finally said, why'd you train them that way?
It's just, you go right to it. I don't know if I know you recognize that, but it's just it's so glaring and it's just, you don't You don't BS
We don't have
around.
time to
And
waste,
that's the value that people get when they have you. Again, I'm going to go
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
that.
and I work really hard. I say this to my clients too. Are you coming to conclusion or are you staying curious? And you can't say to somebody, "I'm so curious why you're such a jerk." I'm so curious
Well said.
why you interrupted me. I'm so curious why you dismiss this idea. And so when I said to her, "Why did you train him that way?" It also gave her pause. And one of the areas we had to go to work on was her empowering and trusting her team. Because it does take longer when you are a manager to explain to somebody. I always have said the hardest thing as a manager is to explain to somebody your thinking because you don't understand your thinking. You just think that way. So how do we discern the constructs and the perceptions, the points of view you're coming from? And that's the second piece I say to people. We have perceptions about everything, ourselves, others, the circumstances. So if a client comes to me and is disempowered, they may start looking out there. It's their fault. They're a jerk. They didn't, shouldn't, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it eventually comes back to, okay, well, what's my ultimate perception about myself? And this person reminds me of somebody, or I stepped over and should have 6 months ago, this person was rude to me and I never said anything. Well, that's interesting to me. Let's look at what had you not speak up that way. Well, you're supposed to be nice. You shouldn't rock the boat. And who taught you that?
Hmm.
Where'd you learn that from? Because that is not learned. I'm sorry, babies rock the boat. They rock the boat. I'm like, you did not come out of the womb, fearful that you were going to rock the boat. You rocked everybody's boat. So I look from that perspective of like the most expressed human on the planet is a baby. And then we grow up,
Yes.
and different education, cultural situations, where we lived, all those things that happen to us don't happen to us. So where has I always equate it to David and, Michelangelo sculpting David, because he was asked, how did you sculpt David? And Michelangelo said, I took away everything that wasn't him. And that's my viewpoint about the coaching I do. I'm going to take away everything that isn't you. And because of my keen ability to listen and because of my keen ability to read the room and read the energy, I can hear when somebody is off. I can hear when they are not grounded because their voice is not coming from their gut or their heart. It's high up in here in their throat or it's in their head, and they're not embodying who they truly are. And I'm just very interested in human beings, and I'm very interested in people truly feeling at home with themselves at the end of the day.
I just love the way you described that. But earlier, too, I mean, about the voice and for others to learn that. Earlier in your description, you went right to it and dealt with their defense of externalizing and blaming. And you basically said, you're the one who was responsible for that because you trained them that way. That's what stopped them in their tracks because they're sitting there complaining
Yeah.
as a defense. They're
Yeah.
doing it all wrong. And instead of just saying, I'm curious, how did you teach? He went right to it, which is great.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think too, comedy feeds into that, right? Because
well,
I was a
you
stand-up
lighten the
comedian.
moment. You see, you've been able to integrate that. That's amazing. It's like a great drink, like a great mixed drink. When you've had a Long Island iced tea, and it's because a Long Island iced tea will make you go, whoa. If you never had
It
one,
doesn't
okay,
taste like it
right?
tastes
Because it
like
has all the dark
Arnold
and all the
Palmer,
light.
really
Yes,
Long
okay.
Island.
It
Yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
taste. It doesn't taste good to be. It's not supposed to.
Right.
But you can take something like that and mix it up, and blend it, and that's the gift that you've been able to harness and put together. Now, I want to ask you. You've said that success for you shifted from external validation to how you operate under pressure. How do you define that for yourself now?
It comes back to embodiment. It comes back to what if it's I have, I had a coach a long time ago who said if it's light, it's right. If it's heavy, it's wrong. And so this is what led me to develop the current program that I lead, the leadership development pipeline that I do with my private clients and go into organizations and up level their high performers. Because in 2024, so going back to imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
2024, I'm giving a keynote and I'm co-facilitating with somebody else to a room of my peers, about 300 other women business owners. And there was a moment when I almost out of body experience sat down And she stood the whole time when I was speaking her piece, and we had designed it so there was going to be a point where we were going to do an exercise, either ask for someone from the audience or, that was our plan, ask for someone for the audience. She goes, okay, it's time for the exercise. And I said, Hannah, I think we need to use me. She was like, what? Why? I go, because here's what's going on with me. I have been sitting here shrinking. I have not been present. And it all came from our introduction because you have a lot of letters after your name and I don't. And I can see that in that moment in front of our peers, I put myself as less than you, even though we've been working together for months to design this. And she, God love her, she was like asking me all the questions until we got to the root of it, right? Because I wasn't at home with myself. So success with me now is being at home with myself, taking the right clients who make me happy, who I was actually thinking about this today. There was a New York Times opinion piece that came out this week about how women are being erased from healthcare studies, from, yes, DEI programs, all those kinds of things. The word woman related to females, companies are kiboshing employee resource groups for women. They may be doing programs, but the reporter couldn't get anybody on record to talk about it to her because they were afraid of the backlash. And that knocked me to my knees. And I thought, I will not be silenced. I will not be silent because I was told coming into 2025, I really ought to switch things up and maybe I shouldn't just be looking at women. And I doubled down. And even today, I have a flyer for my program that talks about DEI, and I don't care because being a white woman in America in this privileged country gives me an opportunity to stand up for those who can't speak. And if I took a contract, this goes back to your question of what is success. If I took a contract with somebody by watering down who I am or what I have to offer to appease some moment in our history, because this moment's going to pass, to appease some moment in our history, I would not be able to live with myself. I would have been selling out on myself. So success for me is staying true to my North Star. Am I building a world of people at home with themselves? Am I building a world where each and every person is known, honored, and appreciated for their unique contribution? And when I think about that, honestly, I think about New York because New York has millions of people and they're from so many different places, so many different backgrounds. And it's like, hey, we got Puerto Rican over here. We got African American over here. We got Nigerian. We got Jewish. We got Italian. We got all the things. And it's one giant melting pot. And it's just so appreciative. It's one of the things I appreciate about the New York, the five
Yeah,
boroughs.
absolutely. And you're referring to the county of Queens more predominantly, honestly, which is the
Okay.
biggest
Well, I
mixing.
don't know. I don't know it that well, but
No, Jen, well said. I want to pause for a moment and acknowledge how powerful what you're describing really is. The work you're doing as an executive leadership coach, a speaker, and an author is truly unique. Your clients are incredibly fortunate to have you because what they're getting isn't just expertise, but someone who's lived this path both personally and professionally. You truly have walked the walk and you talk the talk, and that gives you a depth and empathy and insight that allows you to cut straight through the denial, the avoidance, all the defenses, and pick up to protect them and to bring them to a stage and a point where they need to be. Your approach clearly delivers results quickly and with lasting impact. It's evident. And that's such a rare combination in this field. When you see a leader start to recognize that turning point, that moment when their old protection strategy no longer serves them, what's the first step you guide them to take in shifting toward a new way of leading?
because everybody comes to this point where it's bankrupt. All the tools are bankrupt. All the techniques are bankrupt. And I say to them, who would you want to be if you weren't being that person you don't want to be, the person that, has trained people to have everyone ask you questions? And the answer is always, I just want to be me. And then my next question is, well, who are you? And mostly people don't know because we think of ourselves as the things we do is who we really are. And what we do isn't who we are. What we do is an expression of our vision, our purpose. You could call it your vision. You could call it what we do is a reflection of who we're being. You could say it's your vision. You could say it's your soul's purpose, however you want to say it. But if you want to know what you're committed to, look at the actions you're taking.
I want you to repeat that again as far as who you really are. I love the way you, who are you? It's basically what you're saying to them is, well, who are you? And then they're connected to their image, I imagine. How did you, you know,
Well, connected to the image, who's underneath that image?
yes, exactly.
And what what do you hold dear? So if you were to look at other people who you admire, who you are inspired by, what are the adjectives you would use to describe them? And are you reflective? And I say adjectives because it's easier for people to understand than who are you being, which is how I was originally trained. It's like, well, who do you want to be? I always say, now, how do you want to show up as a leader? Curious, brave, confident, direct, kind, clear. I said, look, there's a million different adjectives you could name of how you want to show up. And what we're looking for is not who you already are, meaning, I had a client once say, well, I want to be, what'd she say? I want to, something about collaborative. I said, Suzanne, you are the most like connected and collaborative person I know. You're always, or she said connected. I said, you already are connected. That's what you do. She's a relationship coach and she was hosting events for men and women singles to bring them together. I'm like, you have something called like the Connection Club. That's woven into your very being. Who do you want to be that you haven't given yourself permission to be because you've been so attached to this image? You've been so attached to the job. You've been so attached to honestly what society expects of you as a man, as a woman, father, mother, brother, sister, daughter, son. We have so many expectations of ourselves, as somebody who everyone in my family is a lawyer. I'm expected to be a lawyer, but I really don't want to be. What I really want to be is a piano player who uses a trained monkey to entertain people on street corners in London. I don't know, like really, if you could dream the biggest dream, sometimes it's, and even this, Nik, even this, I say to people when I create people's vision with them, I said, this is the thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning, the thing that will cut through the noise between your ears. My vision of a world of people at home with themselves happened after 9/11. And I really got, if we had a world where everybody was like comfortable in their own skin, we wouldn't have war because we'd be so appreciative of one another. We wouldn't have domestic violence. We might have arguments, but it's like, oh man, okay, yeah, okay, you, me, we'll figure it out. And there was one woman I was working with, and I always start it with, my vision is a world of people who. And I always tell people, you remember, you're a person. And they'll say they're long, very, educational, like, here, I'm an academic friend, and I'm proud of people who, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, why is that important? Why is that important? Why is that important? I just keep why, like a little kid who's annoying. And I had one client finally take a deep sigh, and she looked at me with her eyes filled with tears. She said, I just want people to be happy. I said, that's your vision. And she goes, is it that simple? I said, yeah, it's the thing we used to dream about before we grew up.
Yes.
And that's the thing that's going to get you out of bed. Now, your mission is an expression of that, and that can change over time. But your vision is your North Star that never alters. So for me, success, a vision of world of people at home with themselves. Who am I truly? What are you committed to? What are you committed to? As in, what's the impact your soul plans to make in this lifetime, in this consciousness? Because my belief is we all incarnated for a purpose. And the midlife crisis, I coined it a soul life crisis. We aren't fulfilling what we incarnated to be. Your soul's like, yo, don't buy a new car. There's something else going on here.
Well said. So when you look back at your younger self now,
Yeah.
what do you understand about her that she couldn't understand yet?
Oh, gosh, so much. I had a cancer scare. I had breast cancer in 2020. Super scary time. Didn't know the outcome. And it was 2020, for gosh sakes. And I have always looked at things as a purpose. There's something here for me to take from it, that turning point, that pivot point. And what I really got at the end of the day was how much I'm loved. And the number of people who stepped up, who cared about me, who sent me kind words, who sent me cards. And it wasn't even about the stuff. It was just about the love I got to experience. And I wish I could tell that little girl how much you're loved and how much it's okay to be weird. Because I've always been a little bit outside of the box, a little bit different than everyone else. I've always talked to plants and animals and been the spirited little girl, who's just sees, I remember in French class in college, I think there was a guy with cerebral palsy who would come in with a wheelchair, and I was the only one who could understand him and help him because I made it my business to, because it was like intuitive for me to be connected to humanity. And that always made me a little weird because I didn't want to be a cheerleader and I didn't care about boyfriends and I didn't care about makeup and I didn't care about clothes and all that stuff. I cared about the world. Even at 15, 16, when all my girlfriends were talking about getting married and getting kids, they were like, "How many kids do you want?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I plan to adopt. There's too many unwanted kids in the world." At 15 years
Mm,
old, like, what kid thinks about that? I wasn't adopted. I didn't know people that were adopted, but it's okay to be weird and you're loved for your weirdness. And that's called authenticity,
yes.
AUTH. Those first four letters is the Greek word for self. Being authentic is not something you mimic or do, it's discovering who you truly are so you feel comfortable in your own skin.
Well said. So, what did your younger self get right, even if the strategy she used eventually stopped serving her? I'm curious.
Wow. What did my younger self get
Yeah,
right,
because
even if the strategy stopped serving her?
I like that you're taking a moment. I don't mean to,
No, no, it's you got me thinking, which I love.
that's the whole idea.
Yeah, the
There's so much
first
that you
thing that
have to offer.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is being friends with everybody. Didn't it was interesting. We came from pretty much an all-white neighborhood in Michigan. Myself and my brother were the only 2 Jewish kids in my elementary school, and we had 1 black kid in my elementary school. And then from there, we moved to Beechwood, Ohio, which was pretty much all Jewish, all kids. But then we saw Jews with blonde hair and blue eyes, which was like, what? People like that exist. I remember my mother calling me and saying, "You'll never believe there's Jews here with blonde hair and blue eyes." Mind blown. Even though my cousin has blonde hair and blue eyes, I don't know what I was thinking. And then from there, we moved to Cleveland Heights, and my junior high was half black, half white. My high school was half black, half white. And I was like, I'm going to be friends with everybody. I don't know why there's an issue here with thinking one is less than or you're less than or being friends with everybody. It didn't always serve me well because I had few friends because I was friends with everybody. I didn't really I had this group of girlfriends who in retrospect were really not a good impact on me, did not have a good influence on me. If I had to do that all over, I would have picked a different group of friends, but I was friends with everybody.
So, I appreciate hearing that. That's amazing, what you've done. So, what do you think your younger self would have wanted to know how you became now?
Well, so my younger self wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a triple threat on Broadway. And my mom goes, "That's really hard." And so I went into politics. Go figure that one. But I think, and now I'm involved in the community theater and I play at open mic nights and I jam with some friends. So all the things, like, don't worry about you not having a profession in the creative arts, which is something you love. It fuels you now. You will have an opportunity to express that and experience that, even though you didn't go into that line of. That was a good question, Nick. Do you do this for a living?
I I went with what you go with, which is you're bringing people back to a moment in their lives that has an impact on them. And there's a purpose that that behavior served for people, for you, for all of us as a youngster to cope and to get us through all the grades until high school and then college and then after college and then working. And then we get our experience. And you're certainly a person who loves to have an experience and is not too worried about the hardest thing I struggle with when working with young people is to let them understand, to really embody what a growth mindset is. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to mess up, but you've got to learn from that. And you cannot become devastated, which is where it always brings you back to these young kids, these Gen Z kids, and whoever comes afterwards. They are devastated where they over exaggerate, they catastrophize things that have gone on in their lives, which doesn't need to happen. What you've been able to do is you've taken an event, something that's happened while you were growing up as a young adult, as an employee working, and you've been able to adapt and be as resilient as you are and reframe and cognitively reframe and emotionally reframe and then provide a structure for all that and then really like guide people through this And this is where, again, I'm going to go back to just watching the work and hearing what you've been able to accomplish. It's just extraordinary. And I want to thank you for the quality of the thinking that you brought to this conversation today, because what's going to stay with me, and I suspect what will stay with a lot of the listeners, is the fundamental reframe that you've offered, that what we've been treating as a flaw, as evidence of something missing, is actually something far more intelligent than that. It's a strategy. It has a history, it has a logic, and it deserves to be understood rather than fought. Because here's what I think that reframe makes possible. When you stop treating the pattern as the enemy, you stop spending your energy trying to eliminate it before you're allowed to move. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop outsourcing to the absence of discomfort, and you start doing something much harder and much more honest. You start learning to lead from exactly where you are, with exactly what's present, without needing it to look different than it does. That is not a small ask, but it's the right one. What I also want to acknowledge is the courage you embedded in what you modeled throughout your life, really letting the pattern be visible rather than contained, because everything in us, when we're activated, wants to make it look like it isn't happening. There's a denial factor, and you made other choice, and something opened up because of it, and that's leadership, not in spite of the vulnerability, through it. For everyone listening, if something specific that they are learning from you, it just has a greater level of impact because you're presenting it, and you're living proof of it. So I just want to thank you for all that you've
Thank you for saying all that. And it made me think of 2 points. One is, for those Gen Z listeners and for those Gen Z that you are working with, people quite honestly won't remember what happened that had you fail. What they're always going to remember is how you dealt with it. Did you spiral, go inward, or did you ask for support? Did you contemplate, reflect on your actions and see what you could have done differently? Did you take yourself out of that situation because it wasn't healthy for you? People always remember. You think about any sports team that loses. You remember, what was it? Was it the Olympic men's hockey team where the Canadians were like, the kids, they were, or maybe it was, I forget which team, but they were like high-fiving the kids, everything. And the losing team, or maybe it was us, which I hate to say that, was like ignoring the kids. You know, everyone's eyes are going to be on you, but they're not going to remember what happened. They're going to remember how you rose to the occasion and dealt with it after the fact. The second thing to remember, practice, 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 then wail. You know, it takes so much practice. It's not as if you're going to see one pattern and then bye-bye, see you. The brain's going to go, wait a minute, you thought you saw that pattern. I'm going to mess with you even further, and I'm going to test you again to see how good you did the last time. So if we can keep in perspective that the moment we discern something, the moment we identify something, the moment we unpack something, and ask ourselves, okay, next time, how would I deal with this? How would I want to show up? The universe is going to go, well, let's practice that one. Always, always, always remember we're human. And we're practicing. We're not machines. We're not AI. We're not robots. You know, we don't make one mistake and then learn and never do it again. There's going to be other situations, people, circumstances that will try your very last nerve. And it's going to be, how do you show up in that moment? You're going to show up strong or not?
I really appreciate everything you just mentioned. It's how you recover and how you come back, and what you've learned. Again, I want to thank you for being here. Jen, what's the best way for people to find you? I know I'll put it on the screen later on.
Yeah. So I would say 3 ways. One, it's easy. It's jencoken.com, JenCoken.com, to find out more about me. You can send me an email, jen@jencoken.com. And then if you want to see what your particular flavor of imposter phenomenon is to help you discern what that brain pattern was, just go to jencokenquiz.com. And it's like a 2-second imposter syndrome decoder where you can go, oh, this is where, you know, I'm more of a perfectionist. Where did that come from? And start tracing that back.
Thank you once again. And for everyone out there listening, I just want to leave you with the one question that I like to leave every time I end an episode. Think about it. What is your pivot point, and how can your pivot point make a difference and change for your life? Jen, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us here on Pivot Point Strategy for Change.
Nik, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.